Hello, welcome back. It is Friday.
It is Friday.
And we are excited. We both, I would assume you love Fridays.
TGIF, man. I'm all for Fridays.
Me as well. It just leads up to the weekend. Got some time off. I guess I'm in the summer right now. So
my job's still in the summer too.
I got lots of time off being a teacher. They give me a whole summer's off. It's just hard to fill my time now, but luckily fantasy football never sleeps. So you always got something to do.
Always got something to do.
So this week we're going to be talking about the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills.
Wrap up that AFC East division.
We got two exciting teams this week.
Yeah.
I think lots of players who are going to be in the mix, especially for the Bills. They got two guys that might be top of their
positions,
top of their respective positions.
Yeah.
So we got a lot to look forward in this one.
Yep.
But let's just jump right on into it. We'll start with the Miami Dolphins.
Dolphins of Miami.
We'll start with their quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. Is that how you say it?
Tagovailoa, yeah.
I am the worst in the history of the world with names, which is not a good mix for a future or for a teacher. So, but we're gonna live with it.
We'll let it pass for hosting a podcast. But
so, Tua, what are your thoughts on Tua this year?
I really want to like Tua. I really, really do. Mostly because when he was drafted, I said he'd be better than Justin Herbert, and then last year happened.
Yeah,
I can't really say that anymore. So I really want to like Tua. I really think he has the talent. I don't know if he just doesn't trust his mobility as much anymore after his injury in the national championship. Well, it was the national championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Came in with his lower body injury. I really want to like Tua, but man, he was so tough to watch at points last year.
Yeah.
He started 10 games, but he and Fitzpatrick and Fitzmagic were just kind of getting tossed in and out of games, and one would start, one wouldn't. But Tua started when it started. It was just gut wrenching to have to try and watch them start the whole thing out. So, and I've got Tua at QB 24 right now. Really want to hope he has a breakout season. Yeah. He's got the talent. He's now got a whole arsenal of weapons, which we'll get to. So we'll see if he puts it all together this year. Not drafting him. Don't think you really have to worry about it, but he in his 10 games, he averaged 14 points per game last season, which that's not what you really need out of your starting quarterback, let alone a quarterback on your roster in general.
Yeah.
Don't worry about drafting Tua, but man, I'm rooting for Tua this year.
Yeah.
Just as a football player.
Yes.
I want Tua to succeed this year.
Before I get my thoughts on Tua, I realized we forgot to acknowledge again the absence of our other fella, Tyler Platt.
We're just used to it without him already.
I know it's only been 1/16 of an episode, and we're used to his absence. We're using his house.
I know we're even in his.
And we forgot to mention the fact that we are missing Tyler. Tyler, we miss you dearly.
We want you back.
We hope that you hurry back from Arizona and that you do not stay there forever. We miss your insights. And yes. All right.
To cry if you should have brought us with you so we could have all been together.
I think that's what it was. We were just upset that we aren't in Arizona with you. So we
deny.
So we decided to just not bring you up.
Yeah.
But now we can give back.
Now we can move forth.
I agree. Tua had 3 games last year. He threw under 100 yards passing. I think
that's bad.
1 or 2 of them, he did leave the game. But just have any under 100 yards passing as a quarterback, it makes it very tough to want to put you in my starting lineup.
Yep.
Even makes you want put you on my bench. I mean, if you average out all of his starts over 17 games, it's 547 attempts, but he only had 3,400 yards and 21 touchdowns. And so that's rough to have, just even on your team. So I agree. I think Tua is just a guy that you kind of avoid, but like you said, maybe with all the weapons, he can put something together.
I'm hoping he does.
Yes.
He is such a fun talent to watch in college.
Yes.
I really thought he transferred well to the league, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes this year.
For sure. All right, let's move on to these running backs. We have Myles Gaskins of last year.
Yep.
then we got Malcolm Brown, who was just signed, and who's their third one again?
I got Savon Ahmed, and he's probably the bigger threat for running back too. But anyways, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, and so Gaskin really came on at towards the middle of the year, and had a really good year. I think he put up 580 rushing yards last year, and that was with missing 4 games at the end of the year. Yeah. So I think he was averaging about 16 points per game, which is pretty good for running back, especially a guy who didn't start till halfway through the year, missed some time. So, and he's not running or touchdown dependent either.
No,
he's a guy who only had 5 total touchdowns last year.
He's a well-rounded running back last season.
He was on pace for about 1,000 or a little bit under 1,000 rushing yards and about 700 receiving yards. He played all 16 games.
Wow.
So, I mean, he's putting up a ton of yards.
Yeah.
It remains to be seen if he can do that over a full season with Tua starting the entire time. But he's a guy who is a good threat in those PPR leagues.
Yeah, absolutely. I have him at running back 22 right now. Points per game basis. Last year, he was running back 13. Well, okay. Technically, he was running back 14, but there was one game last season where Zach Moss and Devin Singletary didn't play, and a man by the name of Antonio Williams for the Buffalo Bills played one game and had 20.3 fantasy points.
Scored more than Devin Singletary and Zach Moss the entire season combined.
That's what it feels like. We'll get to them. That'll be fun. But anyways, so I just eliminated that. But anyways, on points per game basis, Myles Gaskin was right around running back 13. And I think I've said this on a previous podcast. Maybe I've just thought it out loud or outside of a podcast too, but the job's his. People kept saying, Myles Gaskin was a huge winner of the draft because he didn't draft a running back. And I suppose that's true, but he's a talent. He showed he was talented last season. He showed he was a special talent, showed he can get the job done. I don't think Savon Ahmed really competes for that job. I still think it's Myles Gaskin's job, clearly. And even though I have him at running back 22, could easily see him cracking the top 20 this year. I actually think he will crack the top 20 this year. It's just, we never know how health is going to shake out. And, we could probably I'll bump up Myles Gaskin a few spots if we wanted to, but just personal preferences allow us to have guys in different spots. But if Myles Gaskin finishes inside the top 20 again, put it on a t-shirt, I'm going to say, cool. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And I know for sure Tyler is a huge Myles Gaskin fan. There were multiple times last year in our fantasy league where me and Lucas would text each other, what is he thinking making that trade for Gaskin? I mean, we felt like he overpaid, but Gaskin put up 16 points per game. So he's a guy that
hit a home run with him.
So we thought he overpaid, but it seems like he's actually paid the right price for him.
Yeah.
We're going to keep moving on now to some other pass catchers on that offense. They signed Will Fuller, who was suspended the first 6 games.
Is it 6 games this year?
6 games. Yeah.
I thought they got reduced to 2.
Oh, did he?
Now I got to fact
check. Did he?
Keep talking.
It was 6 at first. I didn't know that there was a reduction. If there's a reduction, that's a huge difference. They have the return of Devontae Parker, who I think was kind of a disappointment last year to a lot of people.
Very much just.
And then they used a very high draft pick on Jalen Waddle, whose pro comparison was Tyreek Hill. What do you think of these pass catchers, Lucas?
Yeah, so I'm perplexed on all of them. I want to like Will Fuller, but he went from a great QB situation with Deshaun Watson to a very okay, and that might be nice situation, an okay QB situation with Tua. Deshaun will hit him on the deep ball. Tua's got the arm and the accuracy. I know he does.
Just haven't seen it yet.
We haven't seen it. And Will Fuller is so dependent on his yards per reception.
Yes.
Because Deshaun would hit him. It wouldn't be uncommon to see Will Fuller have 6 for 123. Right.
He was putting up monster stats at the beginning of last year.
Right, but that's still 20 yards of reception. I don't think we can bank on that in Miami. No. Which then all of a sudden takes Will Fuller down from like a top 15 wide receiver to like a top 30 wide receiver if we're really being honest with ourselves. So I've got him at wide receiver 31. I don't know how I feel about the ranking. I moved him up a little bit before the podcast, but man, there's a lot of guys in that mid 30s range that I might look at, both of those wide receivers in Cincinnati, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk's in that area, Deebo Samuel. There's some of those guys where I might take a look at and say, these guys might have higher floors.
Yeah.
I mean, Will Fuller's ceiling is top 10.
Oh, it is.
There's no
100%.
question.
He was putting up 50, 30-point games last year like it was nobody's business.
Absolutely.
He's just, even when he had a 50-point game last year and he only had like 6 catches, he's just not a guy who's going to get you 100 catches. He's just not. He's going to put up 70 catches a game, but he could also put up 1,300 yards.
Yeah.
That's just, but he needs to prove that he can hit that deep ball.
Yeah. So Will Fuller's going to miss he's going to miss the Dolphins season opener.
Oh,
he served that suspension.
That's
season.
what it was.
Yep.
All right.
So he was suspended 6 games, served at the end of last season. Now that he's signed with the Dolphins, he's going to miss the season opener.
That's it. Okay. So that changes how I view him a lot. I thought he was going to miss a lot more time. I just, like you were saying, it's a lower floor because of Tua, because of what we saw last year, but the ceiling is undeniable.
Yeah. And just because you go, and I would say the Dolphins team situation is much better than the Texans.
Yes.
But that doesn't equate to fantasy success. Yes. Deshaun Watson is miles better than Tua, and that's all you need to say about Will Fuller's success. So I like Will Fuller, wide receiver 31, but I think I might be a little too high. I think I have his ADP here. His ADP is wide receiver 36 currently. Yeah. So that's probably where I'm more comfortable taking Will Fuller at this point.
All right. Let's move on to Devontae Parker. Where would you be looking to take Devontae Parker this year?
He's my wide receiver 5. I'm not picking him before the last 3-4 rounds. He finishes wide receiver 46 last season. He averaged 7.6 or 7.4 points a game. I don't remember if that's standard or PPR. I wish I would have put that down too. But either way, you mentioned it earlier. It was still a disappointing season. I was a Devontae Parker owner, Devontae Parker owner in fantasy football, not last year, but the year prior, where he was a top 20 guy.
Yeah.
He paid out great dividends for me. He was my flex player by the end of the year on a team where I had very poor wide receiver play. I could play him. So disappointing last season. I don't think Tua helps him out. They drafted Jalen Waddle, who we're going to talk about next year. Devontae Parker might be the 4th guy on that team.
Yeah.
It might be Will Fuller, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki before Devontae Parker.
Yeah.
I don't know. I used to love Devontae Parker a few years back, but I
just did not see it last year.
Didn't see it last year. I don't think it's gonna. I don't think he's gonna be a thing. He's a late round flyer, and I don't even think he's a flyer.
Yeah,
I think he's just a late round guy with low upside.
Yep. Yeah, and then we got Jalen Waddle.
Yep.
Jalen Waddle was looked at as probably better than Devontae Smith when he was healthy on that Alabama team.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts? What's your prediction this year for Jalen Waddle?
Jalen Waddle's super interesting because the common comparison you heard on draft night and even after, even after draft night was this guy's like Tyreek Hill flies down the field. And I think that's a terrible comp. I hate it when people unless if this dude's surefire, right? Yeah. I don't think Jalen Waddle's surefire.
Yeah.
I don't think we should be comparing anybody to the all-time greats of their positions unless if we know they're surefire, and nobody's surefire. So I don't know. I have my reservations on Jalen Waddle. I like to think of him as more of a Mecole Hardman on this team. You have Tyreek Hill in Kansas City, and Mecole Hardman is a number 2. I think Jalen Waddle is going to serve much more as a Mecole Hardman role. And that's where I have him ranked, really. I have him at wide receiver 48. Jalen Waddle's going as wide receiver 42. I think he's going too early. I'm not a guy I want to reach on. Not a guy I'm really feeling like taking a chance on, especially in that Dolphins offense. Just because, again, we mentioned this in the previous podcast with the Patriots and the Jets. Just because you're a dynamic player and the number 2 option in an offense doesn't mean you're going to perform better than the number 1 option on a really bad team. That's just a matter of fact. So he's got great speed. He's got upside. He wouldn't have been a top 10 pick if he didn't have the upside to be a great football player. And he probably is going to be an excellent football player, but he's certainly not worth a spot in your starting lineup. And I really don't think he's worth putting in your flex at this point either. Could he knock on the door of flex consideration later on the season? Sure, I think so. But as of right now, you're drafting him as your wide receiver 4 or 5. And that's about as optimistic as I'm going to get on Jalen Waddle right now.
Yeah, and I think we saw it last year with Henry Ruggs and these Alabama speedsters. It doesn't mean they're going to pan out right away. I'm not saying that Henry Ruggs is a bust either. These guys are so young. These guys are younger than we are coming to the NFL.
Yeah,
so
true, they are.
You got to give them time. And I just, in that offense, it's now, like we're saying, it's crowded in that receiver room. Tua's not quite proven yet.
Yep.
So it's a lot to be seen. Let's go to that last pass catcher in Miami, Mike Gesicki.
Yep.
Kind of a surprise, I think, last year to some people. It just kind of popped out of nowhere. Had a couple really good games, putting up like 28 fantasy points a game.
Yep.
And then he also had a couple weeks where he's kind of brought back down to earth. Where do you see Mike Gesicki fitting in with those other pass catchers that we've just talked about?
Great red zone target, and Tyler put this in his notes. He's a great red zone target for that team, and that's why you saw, a few of those games in the 20s from Mike Gesicki, right? He'd have a touchdown catch, and then, he'd have his, 5 targets for 45 yards, and he'd catch a touchdown or 2.
Yeah.
So, he seemed to be Tua's favorite target last season, the one that Tua had the most confidence in. I originally had Mike Gesicki up higher. I have him at tight end 10 currently. I think I had him at tight end 8 before I decided to bump him back. And I looked at his stats, and it was just inconsistency that bothered me. It's one thing to be touchdown dependent. It's also one thing to be inconsistent. And when you kind of have both, that starts to rub me the wrong way. But the position is so thin where if I feel like you can't have Mike Gesicki outside of your top 10. People are going to make the case for Robert Tonyan. We've already seen that on our TikTok. Go see our tight end rankings on TikTok if you want to get into a Robert Tonyan argument with us. But he's still a valuable tight end. I think between they're from like 7 to 10. I'm trying to think of who I have in there. I know I have Goddard and Fant in there for sure. Who do I have at 7? It's really going to bother me that I don't remember. But anyways, between those 3 guys, Gesicki, Fant, Goddard, I think you can put them in any order, and you're not going to be wrong.
For sure. I think I'm going. So as I look at these Miami pass catchers, I think I would go Fuller, Gesicki, Waddle, Parker. Do you have any objections to that? Would you change that up at all?
No, and
as far as fantasy I think the way I look at it is the way I would take them in a fantasy draft.
Sure.
So, I would go Fuller, Gesicki, Waddle, Parker.
Absolutely. 100% agree. Yep. And I think, and it's more, and it's going to be the only reason why Gesicki's really going ahead of Waddle is because
the scarcity at the tight end position.
Scarcity at the tight end position. Gesicki's going to be a 7th, 8th round guy, and Waddle's probably going to be, he'll probably be in the same range, honestly. Yeah. But I think people are going to reach more for that tight end than they are for their wide receiver 4 or 5.
Exactly. 100%. So that kind of wraps up our Miami Dolphins.
Yep.
Now we're going to move on to the team that probably has the most significance in fantasy football right now, and that's the Buffalo Bills, at least in this division. With the emergence last year of Josh Allen, putting up 4,500 yards, 37 passing touchdowns, another 8 rushing touchdowns. Stephon Diggs proving that he is a top 5 receiver. He's here to stay, breaking out on his own. So, I mean, even we throw Cole Beasley into a little bit of a sleeper. When you look at Josh Allen, let's play a little bit of would you rather with Josh Allen. Who would you rather take?
Yep.
So we'll start with a big one. Would you take Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen?
See, me personally, I want to be the guy who takes Josh Allen, but Patrick Mahomes is so good. Yes. He's so good. I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes.
All right. Josh Allen or Kyler Murray?
My rankings are going to say different, but I think I'm going to take Kyler Murray.
All right.
I'm still going to rank Josh Allen higher, though.
Yeah.
But I think
personal preference.
Yeah. Like Josh Allen's going in and this shouldn't make a difference on my take on this, but Josh Allen's going to like the 5th round right now. I don't want to take a QB that early. Yeah. I'd rather wait for Kyler Murray in the 7th round.
Yes.
Well, he might be going late 6th, but point being,
I'd
rather I'd rather wait around or two for a quarterback with that caliber, especially since Kyler Murray was quarterback 1 last season.
Yeah.
So that's a toss up. I'm going to take my rankings say Josh Allen, but me personally, I'm gonna sit back and say Kyler Murray.
All right. Would you take Josh Allen in the 5th or Tannehill in the 9th?
Oh golly, that's a really good one. I'm gonna say Tannehill in the 9th. I think I have Tannehill at QB 12. I haven't moved him since we did the Julio pod. Tannehill's got top. He's top 10.
Yeah.
Even though I have him at 12, it's just because I'm really optimistic on Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. I assume Tom Brady still's got plenty of juice in the tank, and I mean, he's got all sorts of weapons. It's assuming Justin Herbert doesn't have a sophomore slump.
For sure.
It's assuming Aaron Rodgers throws over 35 touchdowns this season.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dependencies on QBs 11 through 8.
Yes.
So Ryan Tannehill could easily be QB 7, QB 8 at the end of the year, and put it on a t-shirt. I'm going to say, cool. I'm not shocked.
Yeah. For sure.
I'd rather have Tannehill than I have to build up my depth.
Yeah. So right now, though, if you're looking at your rankings, so you said you take Kyler and Mahomes ahead of Allen. Is there anyone else that you take ahead of Allen right now?
No, I don't think I would. And it's mostly because Lamar Jackson doesn't throw the football enough, can get it done with his legs. Yes. But man, there was some signs last season where fantasy managers started to really regret taking a Lamar Jackson in the 3rd round.
Yes.
So I want to take Lamar Jackson. Dak coming back off an injury. I'm not ready to full fire Dak into my top 3 yet. Dak will be top 5, maybe top 6, maybe, but no. And then you start getting to Russell Wilson and consistency, sure. Aaron Rodgers and consistency, and you start getting some of those other Deshaun Watson if he plays.
Yes.
I think it's Mahomes, Allen, and Kyler Murray are the 3 guys that I'm pretty much locked and loaded as my top 3. Tough to tell me otherwise.
Those are the 3 that I would predict all QB1, like in that mix within fractional points this next year.
Absolutely.
And Josh Allen was a guy I'm really high on. I don't think I'll take him this year just because of how high he was going. I had him in both my main leagues last year, getting him in around 10 in both leagues, which is just insane.
Steal of a deal. I mentioned this in the last podcast. I was double QB, a 2 QB league.
Yeah.
I took Patrick Mahomes in the 2nd. Josh Allen was a guy I was really eyeing in the later rounds, and I knew people wouldn't value him enough. I ended up picking. I think I drafted him like the 8th round of the 2 QB league.
Yeah.
Oh, if Christian McCaffrey would have been healthy, I would have ran away with that league. But anyways,
no kidding.
Josh Allen was a great value last year. This year, I don't like taking QBs earlier than the 6th, 7th round.
Yeah, and I don't think there's much more to say. Josh Allen, 4,500 yards last year, 37 passing touchdowns. He only threw 10 interceptions. He had 420 rushing yards, and he had 8 touchdowns. So I don't see much regression this year. You don't. We can tell from your rankings. So he's just a solid guy to take. But he is going a little bit higher than you might want to take a quarterback.
Yeah.
End of 4th, early 5th is what it's been seeming like. So
that's a hefty price to pay when you don't have much depth built up. You're going to have 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers, if not a wide receiver and tight end.
Yeah.
Or you might have 2 wide receivers, running back, and tight end.
Yeah. You know? So you're pushing it there. Let's move on to these running backs.
Yep. And
I'm just going to start by saying I've just am scared to take any of these running backs. Last year, Devin Singletary finished RB 34. Zach Moss was RB 53. Singletary had 156 rushing yards, 156 attempts, 687 rushing yards, and only 2 rushing touchdowns. He had 38 receptions for 269 yards. That's kind of where the difference came for these guys, because Zach Moss had 112 attempts for 481 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, but he only had 14 catches, 95 yards, and a touchdown. So these guys are running back. These are the running back 38s, running back 40s. Like, you're getting at the end, maybe you take a flyer on it. You pick the one you like the most, and you're just like, you know what? I'm going to hope that this year that you become that running back 1 in this offense, that you really separate yourself. But Josh Allen had more rushing touchdowns last year than Singletary and Moss had combined. Total touchdowns combined. Yeah. It's just like these guys just were proving that they were unusable last year, pretty much.
Yeah. I don't think I need to say anything else. Look, I'm really hoping Zach Moss becomes a thing. I said last year, I said Zach Moss is a guy to keep an eye on. And I had him in one of my leagues, and he was my running back 4 at that point, right? Yeah. I think it's same goes this year. If they're your running back 3, you better hope you have Christian McCaffrey and Chris Carson as your first 2 running backs. Chris Carson's very specific. I shouldn't say just him, but you better hope you have Christian McCaffrey or Dalvin Cook. I'd really say only those 2 guys as your running back 1. So no, they shouldn't be anything more than depth picks on your teams. And you're just praying one of them pans out.
4th, 5th running backs.
Yes. Yep,
for sure. So I don't think there's anything we need to say about those Buffalo running backs. Let's move on to these pass catchers.
Yep.
Let's start with Stephon Diggs. Diggs was, as a Vikings fan, it was hard to watch success he had last year, but it was made easier by the success that Justin Jefferson had that we got in return for Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
But he had a ridiculous season. He had 127 receptions, 1,535 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So I want to play a little over under with you.
All right. Yeah.
On Stephon Diggs. So we're gonna do receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Are you over under that 127 receptions?
One thing before I answer it, what made Stephon Diggs' last season, it was fun to watch, but what made it even more painful was I was the guy making fun of him on Twitter saying Josh Allen can't hit the broadside of a barn with a football. Have fun with that, Diggs. And we don't need to say what happened again. 127 receptions. I'm gonna say under, only because that was such a crazy number, and I'm just gonna expect to see regression.
That would
not even a knock. Just it's like Derrick Henry last year. I'm just gonna expect to see regression after such an incredible season.
I'm the same. I still think he's over 100 receptions, but 127 is just insane. That's pushing that Michael Thomas. You know, that's in some.
And we saw regression from him as well. Yeah. So granted, QB's play was iffy for the Saints, but that's not what we're talking about.
All right, 1,535 yards. You over or under on that one?
I think I'm going to say under again as well. He'll be knocking on the door though.
Yeah,
I think there'll be more big play potential with them this year. I think teams are going to have to start paying attention to. I'm going to foreshadow like I have been doing a lot in these podcasts. I think teams are going to have to start looking at Cole Beasley again. I'm going to give a number on him that I think some people will be shocked by. I think teams have to start looking at him again. I think there's a little bit more of a big playability there for Diggs now. I shouldn't say now, but it wouldn't surprise me if they start to really open the playbook a bit more for Diggs and Allen. So I don't think he goes over, but I think he's knocking on the door.
Yeah. I'm going to go under as well. I mean, 1,500 is just, again, it's one of those ridiculous numbers, but I agree. I don't see him dropping below like 1,300. I think he's going to be within 200 yards of that.
Yeah.
He's going to be putting up these crazy stats. And Stephon Diggs, just to remind you guys, he went going to like the 6th round last year. That's where I took him in our 12-man league.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I made the dumb decision of trading him instead of getting rid of Chris Godwin. Luckily, in return, I did get Derrick Henry.
You got Derrick Henry in return. Yeah.
And Tyreek Hill. So I was made well, but could you imagine if I had Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs throw in there with Josh Allen and Alvin Kamara?
I was trying to compete with you and Tyler last year in that league, and if that would have happened, I think I would have stopped. I would have quit trying. No, he's knocking on the door. Again, if I'm going under on the receptions, I feel like I have to go under on the yards.
The last one is touchdowns, which is 8, which I'm going to go over on. I think that
8 touchdowns.
8 touchdowns. I think that this year, even if the receptions are down, I think he's going to. I mean, he's going to still be such a big part, and that chemistry was just amazing last year, and I think it's going to take another step forward. Yeah. So he's going to be open in that red zone, and Allen's going to find him a lot. Essentially,
you're asking the question of, will Stephon Diggs score a touchdown in more than half of the NFL games this season? I think he does. I think he scores 10. Yeah. 10 is probably the number that I feel good about.
Yes.
Should ask me over under on 10, then I'd probably feel stuck. So if you're giving me 8, I'm taking the over. I'm going to say 10.
I would agree. So as you can tell, we're very high on Stephon Diggs. I think we both of them at our wide receiver 3. He was our consensus wide receiver 3.
I think Tyler does too. Yeah, we're in a wide receiver 3 across the board.
But he's definitely a guy that we have a ceiling of wide receiver 1, and we don't really think he's going to fall that top 10 wide receivers.
Absolutely not.
And
no.
so,
if he does, I would be absolutely shocked. And I would have to do a podcast, an apology podcast for it.
We are unashamedly, unapologetically high on Stephon Diggs.
Absolutely.
And he should not fall out of your second round.
No, he should be, matter of fact, when the first probably top 7 running backs go off the board. If you're giving me Aaron Jones or Stephon Diggs, I'm going to take my full minute that I get to make my pick to really sit and think, who would I rather have?
For sure. Definitely. So we're going to move on to Cole Beasley now, who is that second guy now that John Brown is gone. And Lucas, you have a couple stats here on Cole Beasley. So why don't you take it away?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing on Cole Beasley, whether you can argue whether it was deserving or not last year, but Cole Beasley was a Pro Bowler.
Yeah.
He made, I believe he made second team All Pro. Because as Vikings fans, we're thinking Adam Thielen, like he had an All Pro season. Yet we see little Cole Beasley sneak in there with teammate Stephon Diggs, and man, that kind of drove me up the wall. But goes to show, I mean, Cole Beasley had such an efficient season last year. He finished as wide receiver 27. Higher than you'd expect.
Yeah.
And he had his fair share of games where, he broke over 12 fantasy points, which is great for flex consideration. And he, right now, I have him at wide receiver 43, and he's going in that 40s range in most drafts. He might be the biggest sleeper pick of the year. Like, I'm ready to say that. I don't have him as one of my biggest sleepers, which I'm kind of regretting that now. But he's a guy where, I mean, he's going almost 20 spots later than where he finished last season in an offense that really hasn't changed much.
No.
I don't see why there's any, well, the only knock would be that John Brown is no longer in that offense. So maybe that opens a few more targets for Stephon Diggs, or maybe it goes to Cole Beasley. Maybe Dawson Knox gets involved a little bit more, but Cole Beasley finishing as inside the top 30 wide receivers, now being drafted outside of the top 40, and there are more targets accessible to him.
For sure.
Absolutely a guy I want as my wide receiver 4 at that point. If he's going in the late 40s, I might even be willing to reach around early and skip over a few other guys going in those earlier rounds just to make sure I get Cole Beasley on my roster and that he doesn't go before they come around to me.
Yeah, he's a sneaky guy. And when you think about it, in that offense, there's really no third pass guy. You mentioned Dawson Knox, but he's not even in like fantasy contention for a top 12 tight end. He's not a guy.
He's due for 2 good games a year, and then he disappears.
Exactly. So he's not going to be on your roster. And we were talking about before, Josh Allen threw 4,500 yards, and Diggs cut 1,500 of them. That still leaves 3,000 yards to go around. And he threw 37 passing touchdowns. Diggs had 8 of them. So that's 29 passing touchdowns to go around. So Allen's got a lot of yards to go around, and Beasley can definitely pick those up. He's a sneaky guy in the slot who's all open a lot.
Yeah. So, crafty route runner. Just he's insanely efficient. So he's a guy where I can't believe he's going in the 40s. It's just when I look at my rankings, there's a lot of those guys in the late 30s. A lot of those guys in the late 30s. It's Chase Claypool. It's T. Higgins. It's I can't remember how far I have Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk down there. Just a lot of Devonta Smith I have in that range too. There's just a lot of explosive high upside guys there where you can flip a coin and say, do I want the consistency of Cole Beasley with 12 points a game, 11 points a game, or do I want the high upside that Devonta Smith at wide receiver, drafting him a wide receiver 40 could turn into a top 20 wide receiver this year. So, with where Cole Beasley is at though, if you're more of a play it safe kind of guy or play it safe kind of person in fantasy, I think Cole Beasley is absolutely your way, and he's got the top 30 upside. Absolutely.
For sure. Is there anything else as we look back at this AFC East that we need to add? Any players that we missed? Anyone else? I can't think of any. I think that pretty much sums.
If we did, drop a comment on one of our social media posts, and we'll answer it at the end of one of these podcasts since we started doing mailbags. So
for sure.
No, I really don't think so, because we covered. Even Mac Jones we covered a little bit. Yeah. So I think that's it.
Yeah. So to sum up our AFC East, The only quarterback you're going to take as a starter, we're going to say, is Josh Allen.
Absolutely.
You can I would definitely consider Cam Newton as a backup. Tua's on that edge. Zach Wilson's a no.
Yep.
Running backs, we like Gaskin.
Yep.
We like Michael Carter.
We're all kind of teetering on Damian Harris. I'm the most high on Damian Harris.
And then we're staying away from those Buffalo backfield.
Yep.
Pass catchers, we love Diggs.
Yep.
There's no one in New England we really like. Aguilar's way at the end. Beasley's, Lucas was saying, is a sleeper. That Miami wide receivers are gonna be interesting. And who else? The Jets, maybe Corey Davis, maybe Elijah Moore, but not till the end.
Elijah Moore will be worth your time as a late round flyer.
And then tight ends, you got Gesicki, you got Hunter Henry, you got Jonnu Smith.
It's about all we're looking at, and Gesicki's really the only one that I'm even consider as a
really looking at. So that kind of sums up our AFC. So we'll move on to our mailbag to finish up. We're going to start with a question, another one from Stuart Price, who had one on this last episode. He asked, would you trade Derrick Henry for Calvin Ridley straight up in a dynasty league? This might be one of the toughest questions we're going to get.
Yeah.
This is one of those that if I was sent it, I would take probably a full week to think about.
Yeah. And if I were the person trading, I'd be the person kind of nagging saying, please, I just really want this player. Stuart, that's a phenomenal question. The fact that I have to sit and chew on it and my answer may still end up being, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm going to say I want Derrick Henry. And my only logic is because the running back depth in fantasy football is just, it's not as bad as tight ends, but
it's limited.
Outside
that top 25, you're really struggling.
Unless if you have a Dalvin Cook, a Christian McCaffrey, an Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, and Ezekiel Elliott, and Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones to pair with Derrick Henry, and you need the wide receivers, then I would consider it. But if it's Derrick Henry's your best back and you're looking to just get a stud wide receiver, man, I really think Calvin Ridley could be top 3 this year. Calvin Ridley's ceiling is wide receiver 1 this year.
Yeah, for sure.
No question. I have at wide receiver 5 right now, and I'm tempted to push him ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, but I'm sticking with Derrick Henry only because that depth at running back just plummets after the top 15.
Yeah. For me, it's 100% team dependent on what you got.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm going to take, Lucas is saying, if I got running backs, then fine, I'll take it, just because in the long haul, Calvin Ridley's going to be better for longer because Derrick Henry's just got so many miles.
Yeah.
But that's a really tough one. That's a really good question.
It's a great question, Stuart.
All right. Next one we got from Alan Jackson Flipped. With Julio and AJ Brown, another Titans question. Is Tannehill in consideration for a top 10 quarterback this year? I would say so. I would say he's in consideration for a top 8 year, even higher. A stat that I just heard, when Tannehill took over from Mariota 2 seasons ago, to finish that season, he was quarterback 2.
Oh.
Then this last year, when he had AJ Brown, Jonnu Smith, and Corey Davis all healthy, he was quarterback 3 with all of them on there. Now, I'm not saying I'm not ranking him above Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, but he's proven that he can be that guy when he's got weapons on the field. And I'm sorry, but his weapons have gotten better. I'm taking Julio Jones and Anthony Fisker over Jonnu Smith and Corey Davis.
Yeah.
I think that's an okay thing to say. AJ Brown is another year where he's going to be fully healthy. I definitely think he could be top 10 and maybe even higher. Well, I don't really know how high he'll be, but I think he can definitely break a top 10 year this year.
You know what this means, though? It means that Sam Darnold's a top 5 quarterback.
No,
I'm kidding. Don't take that seriously. No. You said it all.
Yeah.
I don't have Ryan Tannehill inside of my top 10, but man, if I walk out of my draft with Ryan Tannehill as my starting quarterback, I'm pleased.
Yes.
I'm thoroughly pleased. You said it. Would I rather have Josh Allen in the 5th or Ryan
Mm-hmm.
Tannehill in the 9th? Ryan Tannehill in the 9th, 10 times out of 10.
Yep.
He seriously, there's so much flux after the top 7 guys.
Yes.
I'd take any of them.
Mm.
You could put him in any order.
100%.
I think Ryan Tannehill has the total potential to be top 10.
100%.
He probably will be. Who am I kidding?
Yeah.
It's where I have him ranked. And as I've said, I think 3 times now, there's always room for flux in our rankings. And
for sure.
When I say QB 12, I really mean somewhere between QB 9 and QB 15, probably.
Yes. I would agree 100%. Our last one comes from Martin_Ethan11. Why are you guys so high on Deontay Johnson? This comes from looking at our consensus rankings. He says it's a crowded offense and not a lot of ball to go around. So, Lucas, why are we so high on Deontay Johnson?
In PPR scoring last year, Deontay Johnson was wide receiver 21. And he didn't even play all the games last season.
No, he played like 12, 13 games.
I think he played 13 or 14.
All right.
And the amount of drops he had was just painstaking.
Yeah.
If he cuts that in half, he jumps into the top 15.
Yeah.
No question. So, and even if you say he plays another game or two, the amount of points he gets all of a sudden from wide receiver 21, that bumps him up to probably where we all have him in our ranks,
yes.
really. Actually, probably higher. There's a lot of ball to go around, or a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but clearly Deontay is the number 1. Clearly Juju is the number 2. Chase Claypool is 3.5 and James Washington is 3.5. And you got to get Eric Ebron in there. Yeah. But Deontay Johnson was Ben's favorite target last season. I know that his arms running out of juice, but
I think that honestly helps Deontay Johnson.
I think it does. Yeah. It makes if they can be the exact same.
Yeah.
If they could be the exact same and Deontay Johnson just limits his drops, Deontay Johnson automatically, jumps into that top 15. Yeah. So I'm going off of the fact that they don't see any regression, and I'm mostly optimistic on that because they brought in Najee Harris, who I think is going to be a fantastic running back this season. I think their offense improved with Najee Harris, actually. So I think that opens up things even a bit more. But it's just the fact that Deontay Johnson is Ben's favorite target, and if he cuts his drops in half, he's a top 15 wide receiver, no question.
For sure.
I think that's all I really need to say there.
I won't add anything else. I think Deontay Johnson kind of stepped into that Antonio Brown type role. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think that's why we have him so high. And I don't think any of us are going to back down on that.
No,
I think we're keeping him there until we're proven otherwise.
Especially since he's going as wide receiver 3. He's not as wide receiver 3, but for most teams, you're drafting him where he's going in drafts. You've likely picked 2 wide receivers by that point. His
ADP is the 98th pick on Sleeper right now. Which is
that's a
8th
steal.
Round.
That's a steal.
8th round for a guy who was top 15 last year when healthy.
Yeah. And I think on a points per game basis, he was right around that 20s range too, but he plays all of the games, eliminates the drops. He's top 15, no question. Yes. It's, I don't know what else you want me to say. Yeah. I get the hesitancy, but then I'm much rather have Deontay Johnson on my team than passing on him.
For sure. All right. With that, we wrap up the AFC East. We wrap up our mailbag for this week. We're looking forward to the NFC East next week, starting on Wednesday.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Make sure, as always, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook,
TikTok,
YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else you get your podcasts.
Make sure to subscribe, get all of our notifications when we come out with new content. Don't want you to miss out on any of the teams we're covering here as we really ramp up towards the start of the season here. I'm starting to think about getting all my leagues set up for this year. So I'm really stoked.
All right. With that, deuces, and we will see you guys next week.
Deuces.